Hey everyone, thanks for tuning in to Coffee with Eddie. My name's Eddie Campos with Eddie's home team of RE/MAX Preferred Associates. Let's go inside and see who today's guest is. Hey everyone, thanks for tuning in to Coffee with Eddie. This is Eddie Campos with RE/MAX Preferred Associates and Eddie's home team. My special guest today is Rachel Hepner-Zawodny. She's the Executive Director of the American Red Cross here locally. And boy, we've got a lot of things to talk about. As I kept going into my research more and more, I kept going into these rabbit holes of how involved you guys are in honestly, not fun things. These are not things where people are in their best moments of life. So there's Sound the Alarm, which is a great initiative. That's a positive thing to be able to help people that are trying to get smoke alarms into their homes. You've got your mission in Ukraine. You've got disaster relief here locally. You've got blood shortages. And it's like, boy, where do we start? So I thought, you know, the one thing that really caught my attention the most was the story about Stacy in the aftermath of this tornado that hit her town and hit her home. What is the Red Cross's mission? How do they even start something so great?
Sure.
How do they get involved and how do they help people in those situations?
So one of our mission statement, the beginning, is to prevent and alleviate human suffering in the face of emergencies. And we do that by mobilizing our volunteers and through the generosity of our donors. And we are responders. That's what we are. That's what we've been doing since our charter was signed over 100 years ago. And you know what that looks like on a local level is very similar to what that looks like on a national level, only it's tripled in size. So really our role as a organization and our mission is to help that person on the worst day of their life.
You're at your best when they're at their worst.
You are. I mean, you're seeing people in their most vulnerable state. You know, whether a tornado just, you know, tore apart their town or they're watching their home burn in front of them.
Right.
You are the ones that are going to help that recovery process and help them get to where they were, as close to where they were prior to that disaster happening. I mean, here in Northwest Ohio, our chapter also covers southeastern Michigan. We respond to a home fire every 19 hours. That's our average, okay? Obviously, you see an uptick in that in the winter as people are using alternative heat sources. In the summer, they tend to burn hot and fast because of the temperatures outside. Sure. So, but it's something that our volunteers are called to do, and they are all volunteers. They're the ones that are getting the phone call in the middle of the night, because of course that never really happens during the day. They always happen in the middle of the night.
The most convenient time.
You know, when I get involved or when the staff gets involved is when we're dealing with a multi-unit structure fire, a large response where we have big apartment complexes.
You need lots of volunteers.
Lots of volunteers. You know, when the news is present, if there's been injuries or fatalities, that's where we typically, you know, have a much larger response. It's a devastating feeling to lose everything that you own. A lot of times you may lose a pet. You're going to lose everything that you worked for, and you don't even know where to start. And that's no different than, you know, what we do here locally versus what we do disaster response during whether hurricane season. You know, the wildfires have been raging for what seems like years. You know, flooding and, you know, all of those things, the tornadoes that hit in southern Kentucky in December.
Right.
You know.
And the tornado that just hit up north in Michigan.
Absolutely.
You know,
absolutely. Out of nowhere. And people don't know where to start because there's so much noise up here. They don't know where to start.
Right.
And our volunteers are meticulously trained to know what to do, the questions to ask, and how to start that recovery process.
Yeah, so you're there to help bring some calm to the storm.
To come up with a plan. And that's what a lot of these folks need. When we talk to individuals, they'll say, well, no, we've got homeowners insurance, and that's fabulous. Great. But your
They're
immediate
not going to help
need,
you find your birth certificate.
your immediate need for that night,
Right.
you might need a place to stay. You might have pets, and we have to find some place for the pets to stay. So there's just little things that you don't think about. What if you have a prescription that burned in the fire? We have a health services team that makes sure that you can get your prescription. So there's these little things that you don't think about because you're in trauma, like fight or flight mode, And our volunteers they're amazing. And I tell you, for the number of times that I've gone to a fire or when I've deployed to national efforts, when they see that Red Cross vest, people tend to really calm down and they feel like, okay, the Red Cross is here. Now we're going to get some help.
Yeah. So how does that start? So you guys are like on the call list, like, the fire department is alerted, Red Cross is alerted. It's like happening almost instantaneously.
So we have volunteers that sign up for shifts, okay, and it's a weekly schedule.
So like they're on call.
You're on call. You're on call 24 hours a day for a week, okay? And we have our leaders, and we have something called National Dispatch. So I'll use Maumee Fire. We've got a great relationship with Maumee Fire, So if the Maumee Fire Department calls their dispatch and says, we need Red Cross, their dispatch then calls our national dispatch, and then our national dispatch calls our volunteer lead for the week, and they start doing the call down.
Got it.
So those volunteers are then deployed. Sometimes they go to the chapter first to pick up a vehicle or if they need additional supplies, but a lot of times they'll just show up and they have supplies with them, and they start that process.
So like you had mentioned before, so like if they had to go to an apartment fire, they could be dealing with 20 people, 40 people. They need to have a lot more supplies on hand.
When that happens, then we typically identify a place close to the apartment. For example, there was a big apartment fire back in 2017 right by Southwick, okay? So in the middle of the night, they opened Southwick lanes, so we were able to TARTA bus all of those residents there and start doing the intake. And that stuff takes time, and especially with multi-unit structure fires, people tend, like I said, fight or flight, they tend to flee the scene. They leave, they grab whatever they can, and they go to a parent's house or a friend's house. So we need to work very closely with the landlord to see which units are occupied, who lives where, contact information, because we want to make sure everybody's contacted, everybody is aware that there are services available to them, and that recovery process can start.
So this may be a dumb question. So you're there at the onset to get them going. Is there a process that you're kind of with them throughout this process to make sure that they follow through on these things?
So yes, that's a great question. So when we start the process, they're assigned a caseworker, and that caseworker then will identify any unmet needs that they have, and it could be, they need bedroom furniture, okay, and where that doesn't fall within necessarily our scope of service. We might have a list of people, whether it's a church, and that's something that they do. Or they might need, like I said, access to eyeglasses or to a cane, different services. And so our average case stays open somewhere around 37 to 41 days.
Wow.
And that is, making sure that they are following the process. And if we get past that and they're like, yeah, we're good.
Right.
But then a couple weeks they're like, well, I didn't realize that I needed this, and then we can still try to get to yes, but it tends to be a little bit trickier if they're not following the steps that we're laying out for them. It's their recovery. They're in charge of their own recovery.
Sure. So you had mentioned that there are times when you're involved in these things. What is the one thing that stands out to you that would be helpful to anybody that may be watching that you think, man, if they only... Is there something that really stands out to you that was just critical, and then you're glad that the Red Cross was there to be able to help them through this? Smoke alarms is
huge.
Yeah.
And when you're dealing with a multi-unit structure fire, that's a landlord-tenant issue. It's obviously, a single-family home that you either own or rent. A lot of times they are rentals. Making sure that those smoke alarms do work. And if you have kids, come up with a plan for your escape routes and practice that plan. You have less than 2 minutes to get out of the house. And a lot of that is just hinged on the fact that, we look around and, couches and rugs and stuff are primarily synthetic, and they burn fast and hot. So you do have less than 2 minutes. I would also encourage anybody listening who is a renter, especially in a large complex, there are different kinds of renter's insurance, and not everything covers the actual contents of your apartment. So ask the questions, make sure you're covered, because although there might be responsibility for the structure, the contents that are yours may not be covered.
Got it. So how about the volunteers? Where do they come from? How can somebody get involved?
So we have an amazing volunteer recruiter. A lot of times people will call and say, I'm retired, I want to get back. The Red Cross just always seems to be out there in my mind, or there's somebody who's actually benefited from our services before. But
They
if
want
you
to pay it forward.
Exactly. We had a young lady who lost her husband to COVID and just couldn't quite go back to work.
Sure.
And she decided that this was her calling, that she wanted to help people going forward. So a lot of them have those really cool Red Cross stories, but some people just are looking for volunteer opportunities, or they see one of our flyers and they say, listen, this is the amount of time that I have. I always say, if you've got the willingness to volunteer and you're healthy and you want to give the time, we'll find something for you to do. It might not be responding to a fire. It could be, checking people in at a blood drive. It could be installing smoke alarms. It could be, helping us, around the chapter with, office stuff. So it just depends.
It's amazing what being of service to others can help do for the spirit and just for your own self-healing.
Yeah.
So I think even when you think about the folks that go through Alcoholics Anonymous, being of service to others is part of that process. So I think that's an amazing opportunity for people that may be thinking, there's something more for me. Maybe I have a job, but it's not necessarily the job. I need something to be of service to others that's going to be of greater purpose. That's an awesome opportunity to do that.
It's a great opportunity, and it's so rewarding. It's just, pre-COVID, our volunteers love to give that first Red Cross hug. I'm not saying some of them don't still, but that is something that fills their heart, and it makes them feel like this is my calling, and this is why I'm here.
Well, I know that we started the program by saying how you guys are at your best when people are at their worst, and I think that's an awesome responsibility. At the same time, I'm sure that it could be very taxing on the volunteers themselves. So I think it's amazing that people like yourself and the volunteers that you have here locally are there to be of service to others and to go through that with them, because I imagine they absorb some of that just like a social worker would in cases that are devastating.
So that's really the mental health side of things, are not only things that we offer our clients, but for instance, when we come back from the deployment, and deployments are 2 weeks long no matter what. Very few times it's less than 2 weeks. A lot of times it can be more than 2 weeks. And during that 2 week, 16-hour days, 7 days a week, you really just get 1 day off.
Yeah.
And when you come back, you take a couple days off. I mean, staff takes a couple days off. Volunteers are welcome to take time off. But we do mental health debriefing, whether it is the week after, or we do it, after somebody's been home for a few days. That debriefing, because there are some things that you see, and there are some things that you hear that can be triggers for people. It can be hard to unsee things.
Sure.
And I remember, my personal deployment, my last one to Hurricane Florence down in Fayetteville, North Carolina. It was, the hurricane, we landed in the middle of the hurricane, which was strange in and of itself. But just the devastation of flooding and in people being in these large congregate shelters and in the babies, and just all of these things that you go home and you get this overwhelming sense of guilt for being able to go home and shower in your own shower, sleep in your own bed, hug your kids, and have everything that you need. We're very fortunate to live in a part of the country where we're not plagued by those disasters on a regular basis, like, the states down in the south or the wildfires out west. But it's a humbling experience. And sometimes our volunteers really do need that call from we have social workers that work as volunteers, counselors that will talk them through some of the things that they've seen and some of the things that might just be kind of hung up in their hearts.
Sure. Well, I think it's awesome that the Red Cross is there. I think it's awesome that you and the volunteers are there. So thank you very much for everything you've done. Folks, this has been the end of episode 1. Thanks for tuning in to Coffee with Eddie. Please stay tuned to us again for next week's edition. Hey everyone, thanks for tuning in to Coffee with Eddie. We're here to talk to my friend Tiffany over at the Appliance Center. And Tiffany, You've got a great special going on with the Crosley Conservador. What's happening here?
Yes, so this is an entry-level Whirlpool. It is actually made here in Ohio, in Clyde. This set is under $1,000. It does come with a 1-year warranty, or you can purchase an extended 5-year warranty for each piece for $149.
Okay. Or if you're someone who just bought your first home, you're looking
And
to
you're
fill it
looking
up,
for
you need
something
a
to
washer
start
and
out.
dryer, this is a great place to start.
Absolutely, yes.
That's awesome. So if someone needed to have service done, you guys also service as well,
We
correct?
do. We have our service department. We do service all the products that we do sell.
So great product, available right away, can be delivered. You guys can service in-house, made in Ohio, fantastic price.
Yes.
Come and
very,
see.
very affordable option.
Very affordable
Yes,
option.
yes.
Come and see Tiffany. So if you're looking for a new washer and dryer, this is the place to be. Appliance Center on Illinois Avenue in Maumee, or you can find them in Sylvania on Monroe Street. Thanks for tuning in. We'll see you next month.